So as we start to look at the details of what the Trump administration is going to look like, I do not believe that Mike Johnson is going to survive as Speaker of the House. Lucas, what are your thoughts here? Do you think Mike Johnson's going to be able to get reelected? This is one of the first orders of business that the House is going to have to take up. Is they're going to have to elect a speaker. This was extremely problematic in the last go around. We had a big fight about this, and Mike Johnson was sort of the pick that eventually ended up taking the seat. But I don't think anybody's been super happy with him, and I'd be shocked if the trifecta sticks with this guy. There's got to be somebody else that's going to jump up and try and take that seat away from him.
I have not been following the results of the election with regards to uh, the the House candidates that were elected across the nation, but two of them stand out to me. One's Lauren Boebert in Colorado, who ran for Colorado's District Number 4, and she was previously the rep for Colorado District Number 3, and and also Matt Gaetz in Florida. And those two really stand out for me because they are leaders of the MAGA wing. And Mike Johnson was, it was Matt Gaetz who forced a reconsideration of the Speaker of the House in the last session, and they were not satisfied with Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson made made some promises. It was a heavily contentious. I forget how many times they voted, but they voted like 10 or more times, and Mike Johnson made some promises to the MAGA sort of MAGA Republicans in Congress, and then once he had the gavel, he went into a security skiff, and he came out, and he had a whole new view of what the policy agenda should be for the House. So I don't think that I doubt that he will be selected again. My money is on Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan seems to me to be stand out. Like, there are those who complain about his strongly worded letters, but in reality, the House can't do much more than some strongly worded letters. But Jim Jordan is eloquent. He is fun to watch in the hearings. He seems to have a good attitude, get along with people. Thomas Massie might be someone who we would see in the running. He seems to get along with a lot of the members on both sides of the aisle and also be admired, but it looks like Thomas Massie might be moving over to the Department of Agriculture. So I'm gonna go ahead and well, I'll make it. My guess would be Jim Jordan is going to be the speaker apparent.
Now, this is one of those times where really we ought to have the FOMO poly market account. I still lament that we aren't like ready to do this yet, but this would be a fun one to put a prediction on there and see where the prediction markets go.
Oh, you know what? See if you can find any poly market predictions for Jim Jordan. I'd be interested, or if they have a poll going as to who the next speaker might be. That
Ooh,
might be a fun
I,
one.
c-
Ooh,
I can take a look at that. I know
it
that one
would.
of. Go ahead.
Well, I bet they have one for the Senate leader too, which we'll be finding out very shortly as to who that will be.
Yes. I know that there's a kind of a roll up graphic. Let me throw this on the screen of the current picks for the uh, the cabinet for Donald Trump of the Trump administration, who he's going to pick. So let me get that on the screen quick, and we can go through a few of these. I think the funniest thing about this graphic is the picture that was selected for Elon Musk. He looks pretty wild eyed and is all spiked up. It's like
That
not.
that is, yeah. I'm surprised. I'm surprised they didn't pick the one of him taking a quote unquote puff of a joint on Joe Rogan. Uh,
Totally.
That's
That's
after those late nights at Diablo.
Yeah, you know what? Diablo 4, a world leader of Diablo 4. How does Elon Musk do all of these things? He's JD Vance is probably ahead of him on that one.
Well, let's
Um,
run this down quick. So we've got Vivek and Elon running the Department of Governmental Efficiency. You're slotting of Vivek. You think he's in the wrong seat here, right? Because I don't think anybody's really that happy with this pick of Marco Rubio. I don't even understand how this happened. I thought Trump and Marco Rubio disliked each other a lot. How did this ever come about?
well, Trump, as we have seen in his longer interviews, as we've gotten to know some more sympathetic views of him in this last campaign, I don't think he's the type that holds a grudge like we might have seen before. He talks about retiring his fun nicknames for some of these people. We've seen him patch up or to work with many people that he campaigned against, and I think that he understands certainly in his campaign and when he was an underdog, playing up rivalries. And but I think Trump is most concerned with addressing some of the problems and the issues that he confronted in his first term of the presidency, which really makes me begin to wonder with some of these picks. He seemed to have generals and bureaucrats who were very concerned with working against him. But some of these picks, like Rubio, Pete Hegseth, they might see themselves as outside the grain, but I worry about how America first they're going to be, and the likes of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, uh, Kash Patel, Thomas Massie. I don't. I'm not as worried as their concentration on domestic politics over foreign politics, and maybe with the Secretary of Defense, like I can certainly excuse that they're going to be much more concerned with our foreign wars and our foreign relationships. But even the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, I really, when I saw that, I really hoped that Trump was floating that, maybe in deference or as a result of, they're both from Florida. Perhaps he owes some political credence to floating Marco Rubio's name out. But I hope that he takes some of the outcry against Marco Rubio and sends him to be an ambassador in some God forbidden country. Um,
I think shockingly, we don't see Bobby Kennedy named to anything yet. Are you still holding out hope that he's going to be named the Attorney General?
I mean, I would love. We know Bobby Kennedy is going to be. Cash Patel, I think, had a great in an interview that he gave a couple of months ago, with expectations being that Cash Patel was going to be somewhere in the cabinet. And for those who aren't familiar with Cash Patel, I think that we will become much more familiar with Cash Patel in the future. It was conversations with Cash Patel were some of the prized uh, Trump communiques that were sought after by the FBI whenever they were pursuing some of these cases against him. And Cash Patel, I think we'll come to find out, was somebody that Trump found out of the bureaucracy apparatus in his first term that he aligned with, that also foresaw the problems of some of the bureaucratic politics that are going on in Washington. And but Cash Patel, when asked a couple of months ago what he wanted, he said it doesn't matter that much as long as we're in line with vision. He said, I see problems and understand how to make changes that are congruent with Donald Trump's understanding of how how the federal government, the executive department is, or the executive branch is to be run. And you know heading one of these larger organizations, he even commented that having too much knowledge or practice working in any one of the realms can sometimes work against people because they get into micromanagement or get drawn into quarrels with players that they know in those departments. So
Kash Patel may be CIA director, may also be FBI. That's kind of the two that's the current thinking.
Kash Patel, I think the settling out right now, the last that I've heard is John Ratcliffe as CIA director and Kash Patel as FBI director. Kash Patel also was, I think, first began to be more sympathetic and understand what was happening with Donald Trump, going back to Devin Nunes, and Devin Nunes uncovering the bombshell that was so hard to be understood and to be understood by the American public, that the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary campaign conspired together and with our security apparatus to fake a memo with lies about Donald Trump in order to discredit him going into that election. And it seems like ancient history now to go back also to the Comey letter, and Hillary Clinton complains about Comey and interventions going into that, but there was a lot more that was done to damage Donald Trump, and this is even before the laptop, in the 2020 election, going back to 2016. So yeah, Kash Patel, I think FBI, John Ratcliffe, John Ratcliffe too. I forget what his story is, but he was. I believe he was a defender of Trump in two of the cases that were brought against him by the Department of Justice. So, but going back to Bobby Kennedy, I don't know where Bobby's going to be. It looks like he is going to be, from his own tweets that we saw a couple of days ago, is going to be in charge of, put in charge of the FDA. And I don't know where the National Institutes of Health falls, but I saw him, maybe Secretary of the Interior. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where he will wind up, but I know that he
Well,
is.
I think he distinctly and definitively through the course of the election cycle said he was really interested in the health aspects, that he wanted to solve this problem. I'd be shocked if that's not the position he lands in, even though he might be a great attorney general, or is it attorneys general? I think that he would probably gravitate towards that position. I think that that's ultimately what he wants to accomplish. That's the legacy he wants.
Agreed. I wondered if he might have had more power as the Attorney General and leading the Department of Justice, but he seems to have pretty interesting ideas, like if for those government employees who hide behind some of their employee protections, sending them to Guam. So and along those lines, speaking of the Department of the Interior, Trump moved some of the offices of various agencies. The BLM was moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, and they and that was part of the bureaucratic uh, backlash that he was subjected to in his first term. But I would expect that he is going to continue down that road and move agencies out of Washington D.C. and decentralize them. And I think that'll be good for America and good for stopping the problem that exists in Washington today of back channel communications between various bureaucracies. People married to people or people friends with people who are in various agencies, and in a democracy, those communications should be public and not made over pillows or at parties, or wherever they may take off channel. So I think by isolating some of these agencies, it will winnow out those who are true to the cause, and those who are hanging out with Washington D.C. with an eye on the door and the rungs on a ladder and trying to work their way up in some regard.
Maybe taking a turn to the libertarian side of things. So Massie has been seriously considered for the Secretary of Agriculture. This one seems likely to you?
It seems likely to me. I can see Thomas Massie accepting the position in the. I could see Thomas Massie as maybe being having had a good go of it in the House of Representatives. He is adamant about many causes, very hardcore libertarian, very not one of, he's my favorite congressman and maybe of generations. And
Well, come on, second only to Ron Paul, and we're going to get to Ron Paul in a second because he's weighing in on the whole situation with a clip that I think would be worth reviewing. But like all time, come on, like Ron Paul's #1 spot, right?
Okay, well, Ron Paul and Ross Perot both, but I would call them a succession of generations. And maybe Ron Paul and Ross Perot are a little closer in age, but they came to power at different times. Ron Paul certainly in the early 2000s. H. Ross Perot also loved, and he was mid-90s. Thomas Massie is certainly in the vein of true libertarian, and so yes, all favorites. But Thomas Massie, raw milk, and think back also to the Pennsylvania vote and the outpouring of Amish support, which may have been unprecedented in American elections. I'm not that familiar with Pennsylvania or Amish country, but I know that they usually are a somewhat cloistered community in the American tapestry, and it was in response. I'm not sure if you followed this story, but it was in response to government health organizations cracking down on Amish food. Some Amish farmers who I think had a dairy. I'm not sure what else, but the health department, just like the New York Health Department cracked down on supposed wild squirrel and a wild raccoon in somebody's home. The Instagram swatting, or the TikTok swatting of a home in New York. The federal government also
Fred and Peanut.
Bread and Peanut. That's maybe that's what we should call Vivek and Elon as the leaders of Doge, Fred and Peanut, but with love.
Nice.
So there's yeah, Thomas. What do you think about Thomas Massie, Department of Agriculture? I think it's great to have him. I think he understands agriculture.
I think it's an important choice, honestly, and like this one's really important. If Bobby Kennedy is going to be successful in helping America be healthy, then agriculture has got to be realigned to not just producing massive amounts of corn. We gotta do something that's more impactful and meaningful here. So I like seeing Massie in this position. Massie, I think, would do well to complement what would be happening in the other parts of the government, and also that this giving him a step up and onto the national stage in a much more in a bigger fashion, right? I mean, being a congressman is one thing, but being part of the executive administration, this is who knows where it goes next for Thomas Massie. But I like seeing him rise up through an appointment like this. So yeah, I'm supportive of this one.
Well, and great point to the alliance between the pharmaceutical industry and agricultural industry, and how they both work together to support their lobbies in Congress, and I would say neither is in the broader interest of Americans. So having Thomas Massie and Robert Kennedy, who understand that problem, who are both brilliant and understand that problem, it's more than I could have hoped for to have those two at the helms and to try to fix and to not allow the um, not allow the eh, not allow outside influence to interfere. By that I mean, trying to rein in the pharmaceutical companies and having agricultural production companies insert themselves in that because uh, and I don't think it's with ill intent or evil intent that their interests are aligned, but where the pharmaceutical or our health industry and agricultural industries are designed is to be more efficient, and that efficiency is working against our interests because at some point, if we're growing um, you know, lots of animals or lots of crops that are ubiquitous, we are more vulnerable to, mad cow disease or bird flu or other pathogens that can emanate through our food supply.
Yeah, monoculture is definitely an issue. I mean, this is coming up in a variety of places. There's speculation that coffee might end because we're too monoculture and all the coffee beans are too similar. Bananas are in a similar type of situation where there's a very real situation where because we're growing the exact same thing all over the place that we're not going to have bananas. Kind of like when the Cavendish banana was lost, or yeah, I think it was the Cavendish banana. Yeah, it was replaced by whatever we've got now. But bananas aren't the same bananas as people had them a long time ago. So these things are definitely important. The United States needs to think about it pretty hard if it's going to make some realignments. And it looks like the pharmaceutical industry is lawyering up, lining up to try and fight the Trump administration on some of the changes that they want. I think it'd be a good point to play that clip by Ron Paul. You think we're ready for that one? I think we should listen to that.
Yeah,
He's weighing
yeah.
in on some of these picks, and I think it's pretty interesting.
Cue that up. Cue that up uh, because I love Ron Paul as much as Thomas Massie. Um,
All right, let me
the
let me do this. So I gotta always
Okay,
adjust the audio, but here we go. Let me
yeah, turn it up. I'll mute up.
Big concern about this announcement that at least somebody's quoting somebody like Trump and saying Trump said this and Trump's plans to do this, and that has to do with Rubio. Rubio, he's one of those that's not on our favorite list.
No.
So, and that means that he could become Secretary of State, and I don't think that would be good for the country.
No.
So,
Or the world.
there's two different kinds of people in the world, the way I see it, when I want to simplify it. There are the authoritarians, and there are the people who want to follow, voluntarism and peaceful means. And I would put him into the category of authoritarianism because he's expressed himself. And his authoritarianism doesn't mean that he beats up on people. That's a personal thing. But authoritarians in politics is much, much more deadly.
Yeah.
They have more power, and they can do things. They can change the world. They can, especially in the Secretary of State, they can set the stage for a conflict that becomes very real and very dangerous. I think the non-intervention is obviously the way to go, but right now I would say that Rubio, as Secretary of State, would be taking a step in a direction that we would not be pleased with.
Yeah, and I mean, as positive as we felt yesterday, we were talking about some rumors about Vivek Ramaswamy, and although he's not exactly in our camp, he's more of a realistically minded person who we thought would look at the world pretty objectively, and a very smart guy, objectively true, a very smart guy. Well, it kind of went downhill, and I went home, and not only Rubio is bad news, Dr. Paul. I don't want to make it even sound worse, but Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, an absolute disaster. And Elaine Stefanik, although she won't necessarily be in a policy-making role, she'll be enormously high profile as the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And ironically, because we cheered when Trump said, I will not have Pompeo or Nikki Haley in my administration. She literally is Nikki Haley. You know, she's a younger version of Nikki Haley, you know, in terms of policy. So very crestfallen on our part. As you say, our fingers are right now so crossed, I think we need a splint on them, hoping that we'll at least get one.
Okay. That's the end of that clip. Couple of names thrown out inside of that whole business.
Say that again. Sorry, I was talking to you.
I said there were a couple of names that got thrown out in that whole conversation. I think some of them are on our big master cheat sheet of the Trump administration. So I'll pull that back up so we can have a face to the name. So I think he named off a couple people. Elise Stefanik, the U.S. ambassador. You're saying he was saying she's just like the undesirable Nikki Haley, but you're saying, well, she's been cordoned off into something that doesn't matter, which is in the UN, right?
Well, I think there's something broader that we need to address first here, and that's going to be the on. You know, Trump seems to be, and the conflict in Ukraine seems to be coming to a close. But however, the Israel's conflict with their neighbors in the Middle East are ongoing, and some of the rhetoric that has been made against Iran by Trump and J.D. Vance, and especially members of some of the members that we've mentioned with regards to protecting Israel, you know, at all costs, Zionism, Zionist interests, our American interests. These have been statements that have been made by some of these members of the cabinet, and I think that is the concern that they're making on the Liberty Port, Ron Paul. You know,
so they said somebody was an absolute disaster, and this name isn't as familiar.
Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz.
So this is this guy in the lower right-hand corner here, the National Security Advisor. So they really don't like this guy, and this guy has no relation to the Waltz that everybody's gotten used to, which is Tim Waltz. This has nothing to do with that guy.
I think they're cousins. Probably are. You can tell by their last name. You know, when it comes, because you know, we might say the same as Stephen Miller. We're familiar with Stephen Miller from the last administration, but you know, Pete Hegseth is the one who's nominated for Secretary of Defense. Is the one who said Zionist interests are American interests. You know, I don't have as much of a problem with some of these statements coming from members of the defense or security. Like I expect them to be suspicious and to be wary. Which I mean, I don't know. But when it comes to the Secretary of State, I do have concerns there, because they were talking. They were also talking in this clip about two types of people in the world: those who favor the carrot and those who favor the stick. And
yeah, voluntarism versus authoritarianism. This one's near and dear to the heart of most people that would, I think, have supported Trump, especially from the Bitcoin angle and decentralization. Voluntarism as a foundation of society. I think that's a very strong cornerstone of what libertarians and even anarchists would probably say that they want from a governmental system.
Well, but let's also look at Trump's tactics and how he's worked in the past. In a couple of days before the election, he was in, I believe, Tucson, Arizona, maybe Phoenix, Arizona, and he sat down at a rally on a couch and had a very long conversation with Tucker Carlson. And this is the conversation from which we got the clip about 9 guns being pointed at Liz Cheney. Which I believe was taken out of context, because what he was talking about there was exactly this issue that we're talking about here. And he was saying there are some people who want to fight with everybody and want to fight with every country, and we can't have a country that's run that way. And he also brought up John Bolton. And for those who aren't familiar with John Bolton was a national security advisor, okay, same role as Mike Waltz. And Trump says out and out in that conversation with Tucker Carlson, he says, the reason that I kept John Bolton close to me was not because I ever believed, and he says incredibly he's pretty mean to John Bolton. He says red-faced man with a stupid white mustache and what an angry little imp and all sorts of things. I couldn't believe it. But I also think he's 100% right. And I at the time that John Bolton was a national security advisor, I lost a couple of fingernails because I was chewing them every morning and every night. And I was thinking, how in God's name could the leader of this country be listening to the likes of John Bolton? And Trump said in that interview, he said, I never listened to John Bolton, but it was very helpful for me when I had to go sit down and talk to world leaders like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un to have them look across and see and be reminded that there are those people in America who think this way. And to understand like there's that element that I have to deal with. And so I'm sure that Trump has not changed and will continue to we'll continue to use some of the same bluff and bluster, especially in his picks for cabinet and early on, because in some ways it's signaling, and he might not listen to them, but as I think he's much more concerned with them being loyal to him, and he'll listen to their advice. But I don't know.
Is some of this keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Is that a little bit of what's going on here?
I mean, I would doubt that. I think friends is a terrible, terrible, terrible word to invoke in discussions of politics. We all see the world differently, and I think really good politicians understand this inherently. And it's also why I can't stand the likes when politicians say "my friend," I think they're absolutely duplicitous, and I'm thinking,
Yeah, it's right up there with folks for you.
I mean, folks is a little bit better. My friends is actually worse. And I'm thinking of especially John McCain and sort of that ilk and that era of politician. They love to say "my friend." You know, where else do we hear them talk about "my friend" all the time? In the Supreme Court, and what a line of horseshit that is. The Supreme Court would do a hell of a lot better in discovering justice if they dispensed with some of the powder and wigs and were more forthcoming with their discussions. You know, why also can't we have televised? Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. So when I look and see the likes of Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik. And I'd also, when I saw Elise Stefanik, the first thing that I thought was whenever we had David on the show, Chief of Staff for Tom Emmer, and now I forget the other Minnesota candidate. I don't know if you can help me out there. When I asked him for representatives that impressed him in the vein of Thomas Massie and Jim Jordan, his immediate response was Elise Stefanik.
Well, it was Brad Finstad, and also got reelected, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, congratulations, Brad. So and also when it comes to the UN, the UN has a lot of issues. It's well, it doesn't have a lot of issues. It has one really important issue, and that it is a toothless organization. The ICC and the ICJ, the International Criminal Court of Appeals and Criminal Court of Justice, are like the two wings of supposed enforcement. Anyway, the UN has lots of problems, and recently the UN voted to censure the action Israel has taken in its war with Hamas in Gaza, and now several other countries along its border, and the UN voted something like 187-2, and those two countries that did not support the resolution were Israel and the United States, and so I don't think that there's going to be any difference in the alignment of agendas in the UN, but I also don't know that it makes that much difference. And I think the United States needs to begin to understand, in a world that exists with options for especially money, which is the carrot that we've used for soft power throughout the world since World War II. Now that there are other gardens in the world, BRICS, Bitcoin, and others that are occurring, then we might have to start taking more notice whenever we're using our our veto, which we're the only country that has a veto vote. We might actually have to start engaging in our ideas of democracy and majority rule, not just in the United States but around the world. So that's why I'm less concerned, but it is a cause of concern with me as I look at this cabinet as to how the conflict in the Middle East is going to play out. And I also think back to, Trump has made statements that he's very wary of nuclear war, that he does not want to have a war with Iran. But in his last administration, he was not above assassination, and he had the leader of Iran's military assassinated, General Soleimani. And I think that is a terrible, terrible, terrible precedent to set throughout the world. And I hope that having the likes of John Ratcliffe and Kash Patel exposing, Kash Patel, by the way, wants to open up an office that immediately begins declassifying all the documents that have been classified, because he says that the classification system is abused to cover up crimes that are committed by bureaucracies all over our federal government. And I think I think that the policies, the strength in democracy is like as Bobby Kennedy says, it's stating your arguments and arguing and coming out with the best ideas. And we need to have that happen at our federal level too. So I do think there are players in there that are going to move us towards more sunshine, more open discourse. And I hope that that also plays out in our foreign relations around the world. And
We're likely also to see the JFK files get opened up. We talked about election consequences, and this being one of those things which is likely to occur, and probably with Kash Patel saying this, that that plan is likely to go forward, and the rationale for why those shouldn't be released was that there are people living who would be implicated in that. And I think, well, then let the chips fall where they may, right? That's what's going to happen here.
Well, Trump said that Mike Pompeo came to him after he said he was going to release the JFK files, and Mike Pompeo, in his words, begged him not to release them. And Mike Pompeo at the time was the head of the CIA. And Mike Pompeo said that the CIA would be embarrassed. And so I don't know that it's about individual people or protecting individuals. I think it's about the reputation of the CIA. But as we've learned more and more details, the tacit acknowledgement that the CIA was involved with the assassination of JFK, as we begin to understand that the federal government has used the cybersecurity.
Well, embarrassed is a little underselling that, right? I mean, if the CIA kills the president, I mean, embarrassment, that goes a little bit beyond that, doesn't it? Or maybe that's just okay. I'm not sure. It seems like it should go beyond that. That term seems like we're underplaying the situation here. If the CIA is actually involved in the assassination plot of a sitting U.S. president, that's pretty bad.
Well, I think about the CIA's like inherent relationship. I mean, CIA is the thumb of the hand of the State Department, and the State Department is how we deal with other countries around the world. When we openly admit that our federal government has killed American politicians, then we begin to really lose a lot of ground with our declarations of peace and beneficence to all these countries around the world. I don't think, though, that there is any. I don't think. I think that used to be a very fringe idea and an unspeakable notion to entertain that idea. But I think that we begin to understand that it has happened. I mean, Bobby Kennedy has stated himself that he thinks that if it wasn't a rogue agent of the Miami Department of the CIA, then it was the actual policy of the Miami Department of the CIA to have not only his uncle but his father killed. And that to have everything to do with, hey, guess what? Our conflicts, especially in the Middle East. And so very, very tied in also to current situation that we have over there, even our wars in Iraq and Libya what do all of these wars that we supposedly say is about oil, whenever we have massive amount of oil reserves here and oil reserves a lot closer to home. I think they all have a lot in common, and that's the security of Israel. So I think it's very important to actually come out and have the discussions and talks about how um, how we get along in the world and how other countries get along in the world. And I think that for us to admit that the State Department has engaged in deceit and morally unethical behavior is very important. So, but I also think that we begin to grapple with that, especially in this election, as we see some of the mainstream media, MSN, NBC, CNN, their ratings are massively down. Elon has been a great patriot in not just Elon, but also the likes of Rumble and other platforms in sustaining the morals of democracy, open discourse. And I think that we see that a shift in that pendulum, in that trend, and it's going to have a lot of impacts in the interior politics, the domestic politics of our nation, the interior politics of the federal government, and our foreign policies around the world. And I think this Trump administration going to be very interesting how it all plays out. That's all I got. I know we're on the hour, on the 40 minutes, whatever. Short hour.
Well, just one last thing to bring up, because we're talking a lot about the relationship to Israel and how things are going. Did you see this graphic at all? Like that the Jewish voters overwhelmingly picked the Democrats. I wonder how much impact this will actually have, or if this is just the way it's always been.
I think this is a whole. I think this is a deeper and longer discussion.
All right, well, not to bring it up too much at the end, but it did catch my eye. And since we're talking so much about what is the policy of the United States, how is the cabinet picks likely to fall, with Thomas Massie's statements where he's said every congressman and senator has an APAC babysitter. Things have been said, and definitely in the next administration, we're going to see things come to a head with respect to Israel and with respect to the various wars that Trump says that he wants to end. So maybe something to noodle on, but maybe we can pick this thread back up later.
Well, I don't want to leave it hanging there. Let me try to quickly sum up some thoughts on it. We've also had a discussion about America being a quote unquote Christian nation, and also this notion of separation of church and state. And I think that religion is the foundation of politics. And I think that there is a religious kinship that is seen between Christians and Jews. I don't understand, or I do understand, but I don't think it's not. I think that we actually moved into a world where that kinship is also shared with Muslims too.
Well,
So,
that's why they picked Mike Huckabee, right? I mean, actually, I've heard the reason that Huckabee was picked is because he has this, evangelical bent, strong supporter of Israel, thinks that there's a lot of crossover, and that those ideas are not disjoint. So,
well, I think part of the way to reach and also the strength of having religious associations that underpin political conversations is to assert morals. What's the first commandment? Thou shalt not kill.
no, it's thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Okay, cheers. Second command depends on how you count it. Come on, Moses. Regardless, it's way up there, and even if
It's way up there. It's way up there for sure.
Yeah, well, if we want to fast forward to Jesus's golden rule, it was treat your neighbor as yourself, and but we need to be open and admit what's been going on. These special black operations, morally unethical operations of the state. You know, there's also this narrative. Well, it's necessary in politics. I don't think that's true. And I think that there are countries who pursue the moral high ground and are forever better for that. So uh, I don't know. This is going to be an issue. It's reflected internally with the with the struggle for like religious voice and religious power in the United States. The evangelical movement is every bit a part of that. We probably should have that conversation and dig deep into new millennialism in the United States, and you know, so our fight for fairness for all classes of Americans, the working class, the poor, as well as the elites, as the gilded class. So you know, there's one other person that we haven't brought up too that was on the list, and that was the ICE, the border czar, former ICE director Tom Homan. I don't know if you caught his response to whenever he was summoned to the hearing by the Democrats in I forget what house committee. It's a clip that's made the rounds on Twitter. I think that I've been surprised that that this cabinet, that this administration is holding to their policy agenda of deporting mass amounts of immigrants. We'll see how that plays out. But again, I think that's I don't think that.
I did see that clip. That's where, you know, they talked about, you know, how are you going to fix breaking up families, and he says, just deport the whole family. There you go.
Yeah, well, and you know, he's not wrong. And his follow up to that of whenever somebody commits a crime and we put a jail, you know, when a man robs a bank, we separate him from his family. But again, I think this also goes to deeper notions about how we move around the world. You know, also, I don't know if you saw Thomas Massie and supporting another. He's a co-sponsor of a bill to forbid members of Congress from having dual citizenship. And I think again we need to be phrasing this political conversation not in some notion of you're bound to the place that you're born in the world, but like having a notion or an allegiance to two geographies, to two countries, to two nations is maybe not in the best interest for either of those nations. And I think that's part of the problem that we have. And I think Thomas Massie, from wherever he is, will continue to wage that fight. I think he understands it, and there are others who understand it too. So I think that's a good place to end it. We could go on. We could continue to go on about some of these, and we will. We have years and years coming to have these conversations. So. Interesting to see this cabinet take shape and to imagine where they're going to be moving in the future.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.